I'm talking about technical debt management as transparent communication hub. To the former topic, it's not really a new topic, so we are not switching the topic. It's maybe complementary, and even what I've just learned is something we need to have in the future, but you will see it. So at first, something about our company. So ESI is a virtual prototyping software company, virtual reality, physics simulation, system simulation. So everywhere a prototype, a real physical prototype cannot be built or needs to be, or the resources or the money needs to be saved. It can be done virtually. I started, about myself, I started as a software developer, was then very interested in that kind of stepping back, thinking about structure, not just starting to hack and to implement, and became a software architect, then an enterprise architect, and now I'm also additionally in that infrastructure thing. If you would like to know more about me, just ask me. Okay, the journey through the talk is, I will talk about our situation without managing our technical debt and where we ended up or where we were, and in some areas of our company still are. Then I'll talk about how we defined the process and why we defined the process. Then how we started to explore the already accumulated debt we have. And then how we started to understand and to communicate within the company, and then I have some takeaways. Okay, at first our situation without technical debt management, how we started. I have for you a typical release planning conversation between a developer and the product manager, and one of the typical conversations within our company is a developer comes in the release planning. We need some time to fix the architecture because we have really a lot of issues to fix, and those issues are in my mind in some post-it notes somewhere, maybe in some emails. And the answer is we don't have time for that because we have an agenda, we have a target, we have new features, we need to put them out. I don't know whether you're familiar with such kind of conversations, but for us it's at least typical. So and the other day, release planning number 2 is we need feature X for the next release. And this is, by the way, this is very important. We need that feature really. And the developer is, yeah, that's too difficult. We cannot really do it because we have those issues, yeah? And let me think, but we will make it possible, okay? And then some time goes by. Thinking, implementing, hacking, finding workarounds maybe. And then, yeah, we found a solution, but we really need to fix this later, yeah? That's very important, we need to fix this later. And the whole answer is, why does it take so long? Why did you take so much time for this little feature? And I think most of you know those kind of conversations. So our situation was misalignment and increasing debt. We had frustrated developers with bad code and architecture, frustrated product and project managers, bad surprises, slow development, and all we had was only diffuse information. On one hand, all these issues in emails, in the mind of developers, crowd knowledge, lists, wherever, but not really transparent and not understood by product management. And for product management, it was really hard to understand what is that technical debt? This technical debt is that big monster which costs money and we cannot really control it, and but also that that part of uncontrolled taking up of technical debt. So in both situations I showed you, we had that technical debt for short-term goals, uncontrolled taking up. Yeah, this big fear about the word technical debt. On one hand, that we don't know what it really is. Maybe the presumption that technical debt is only an excuse for a slow development pace or something like this. And but on the other hand, this fear of there is something we don't have in our hands, it's sleeping somewhere and we don't really know it. And that's basically the situation we were in. And this situation led us to start to define a process. And but we had to justify this process to start that process. So the situation was one factor why we need a technical debt management process. On the other hand, in our company, we track our financial debt, so it's more or less obvious that we also need to track the technical debt. We had this big fear about what is it, how much do we have, so we need transparency about our products, codes, projects, so that we are able to act on it. And when we have technical debt, we figured out that we took up the technical debt, some technical debt by accident, which must not happen, and some by purpose, which needs to be tracked. I will say something about that later. And we need to have the ability to decide and remove on correct priorities, not just, the pile could really be huge, and we need to see what is really important and what is not so important. To not waste our resources. But to set up a process, at first we needed to define the terms so that within the company, everybody knows what we understood, what technical debt is. The definition we have might be a little bit different than what you've heard or what it is in your company, but basically I think there's a big overlap, at least within the enterprise. We need to be clear what it is so that there is no confusion within the enterprise. So that's a typical definition, you know. An easy solution takes much less time. That's why here is that blue box, but the better approach, which a solution really should take, and the good solution for long-term software quality requirements takes this time and this resources, and the difference is the technical debt. That's the amount of resources, time, things you postpone to pay back later. And we needed to make clear that technical debt can realistically never be really zero. That's not possible. So, and that's the same as a software cannot be bug-free. You might think of, but it's never the case. So, and we have these two images. We showed these two images to make clear what we mean with technical debt, to make a comparison. So this is a temporary pedestrian bridge. That's an easy but intermediate solution. Everybody knows when such a bridge is built, there is a time later we need to remove that bridge, so there is something we need to do later on. That's not a solution for eternity. The other thing is this bridge. This is an unstable bridge, I would say. It's an easy solution. Maybe it's an old bridge, so it's old and an aging technology, and they couldn't do it better, or it's just technical debt taken up naively, so just built for the purpose for people to cross, but not taking into account that maybe later bikes and cars and trucks would like to cross that bridge. which is in that case a big technical debt. But that leads us to a categorization of 3 categories for our technical debt. And the 3 categories are technical debt taken up by purpose. That's like financial debt. You do not just end up in having that debt. There's a specific decision you make, and this needs to be purposeful, documented, and then there also needs to be a payback plan. Then we just saw accumulated technical debt which was taken up naively for whatever reason, ignorance, stupidity, or they didn't know better, or whatever it is. But we also recognize that technical debt taken up by purpose and not documented is technical debt taken up naively, because we lost that purposeful information of the decision, and we also lost the justification. So it's just technical debt and we don't know where it comes from. And number 3, category 3, what we figured out is it just happened by age. Design decisions we did several years ago were valid and good several years ago, but the technology changed, what is state of the art changed, and also the requirements changed. So that's why happened by age. That's something we need to control, but we cannot really remove from the whole equation. We put up this, so coming back to the title, it's not only technical debt management, it's technical debt management as communication hub, because the most important thing for us is to communicate within the development teams, but also with the management, with product managers, with project managers. And that's why we brought up this image of an iceberg. This iceberg represents the software. You have a visible part, which is the features, the behavior, all that you can see from outside. And below the ground, there's the architecture, the invisible part. And we make the comparison to say that features can have bugs, and this is very visible and everybody knows what that is. But the invisible part, the architecture, the structure, can have technical debt, so that we have the comparison that bugs and technical debt are similar things, but on another level. One is visible, the other one is not visible. Bugs can depend on technical debt, and with that we get more recognition on the term technical debt, and then the need that it needs to be managed because it is clear that we manage bugs. So then we talked about the costs. So here the blue one is the base debt, the orange one is the critical growth of the debt when you do not pay it back. And then we also have the gray area, the interest. So, and to make that comparison with, or to take that image and make the comparison with technical debt, what does it mean? So we have 3 categories of costs we identified. And at first, that's the repay cost. So that's the effort to fix it, which is basically the base debt and the growth at the time you start to fix it. And in our management process, we name that complexity, because the cost to repay it, it goes along the complexity of the problem. So it's a relation. Maybe it's a shortcut. We could make it much more complex, but we also use the term complexity for bug tracking and for categorizing how much fixing of a bug might cost. So that's why in our system the repay cost is reflected by complexity. The second one is the interest cost. That's the gray one. That's the implication, or the implication of the problem of a technical debt. That could be additional effort to implement new features. That could be an ability to deliver certain features. That could be more effort to find bugs or a high risk of to create regression. That's basically the cost we have to pay daily when we are working with the software, whatever that is. That's basically reflected by the severity. So how strong, how big is the problem, and how much do we suffer daily because of that problem. That's a cost we have to pay, and in the communication with management, costs are always a good thing to get an ear. And number 3 is the most critical thing, but also the most challenging thing to really communicate about. That's the interest on the interest. That's the orange part. That's increasing the debt due to ongoing development. When you have a technical debt in an interface and you build on top of that interface, you basically grow the technical debt of your system, because when you fix the API, all the client code you build on top of that needs also to be fixed. So that's why if you're doing nothing, technical debt will automatically grow. And the interest on the interest, we called it contagion. That's how infectious is that problem in the system. Okay, then we were at the stage to design the process. I will not describe the process in detail, as you can see here in the background. It's enough to talk about those 3 areas. They are more or less obvious. But in the process, we also defined the responsibilities. And one thing is really the management of the technical debt tickets, the maintenance of a registry. In our case, we used in all our teams, we used the ticket system where also the bugs are maintained. And every developer, everyone who knows a technical debt can enter this debt in the ticket system. He is required to put some attributes in, but an architecture team in each of those for each of those codes is responsible to review those tickets, to attribute those tickets, to have an interaction with the one who entered the ticket, to raise the quality of the ticket so that at the end you can see. At the end we are able to communicate on the basis of those tickets. The red one is then the triage process to decide what of the technical debt needs to be fixed in the next release cycle and the next development cycle. In that process, project management, product management, development is involved, and they really need to. They should not fight against each other. They need to really balance out between the business value and the need and the resources they have, the features they want, and the problems they have. This really needs to be a balance, and that's, I think, the challenging part, but we cannot have that challenging discussion without the data, and that's why it's important to have the data at first. And then this is just the development process to remove the technical debt, which is part of the process for sure. So we put up some rules and guidelines how to document technical debt. At first we said to use the ticket system because the bugs and the technical debt is something similar, and it makes sense. It was obvious for us because even in the components or wherever the technical debt is, it really can also relate to bugs, or the technical debt could lead to bugs. So use your ticket system. The next rule or guideline is describe the problem, not a task. What we saw that many developers, when they start to document technical debt, They document it as a task. We need to do this. We need to fix this. Whatever. In the communication with a product manager, it makes, for them, it might make no sense. That's why we stick to it, that it's very important to describe the problem and not the task, to really distinguish between the problem on one side and the implication on the other side, and then a third thing is the solution proposal, to be really clear. And that was something which was very important for us to distinguish between the problem, the implication of the problem. And the implication of the problem is what we suffer from, what we have to pay daily. The best would be if you could quantify this, but in many cases it is just not possible to quantify it. At least to qualify it, that's for sure possible to qualify the implication. Initially, we get a lot of accumulated debt. So we are filling the system with detected technical debt, let's say it that way. But one thing which is very important is that technical debt we take up today in a project, today or tomorrow, we need to justify that, and this needs to be documented at the technical debt in that system. And justification means just the reason why this was done. All the stakeholders which are involved in this decision, and a repay plan when they plan to really repay that. So that technical debt is not only, or the reason is to start to make it visible that not only bad development habit is the reason for technical debt, also preferring some features or adding some features or making those shortcuts because of business reasons is also a reason for technical debt. And this is something in those decisions we need to have the implication, and we need to document the implication of such purposeful decisions. Propose a solution and give the ticket the proper metrics. You've already seen severity, complexity, and contagion. That's the 3 cost factors, and with these 3 cost factors we are able to categorize and prioritize those tickets. And this needs to be really categories or numbers, however, to be able to, at the end, have some statistics and to dig to the problems, to the real problems we have. So then we started to explore the accumulated debt. First thing is we needed to fill the bucket. So we set up all those ticket systems. So we had different ticket systems for different products, but we unified the way of the tickets are defined, but we are still using those different ticket systems. So at first we needed to fill the bucket. How do we do that? We just started with what is in our brain, what do we know. So we had several initiatives so that developers were able and requested to enter the technical debt they already know of, they have on their post-it notes or somewhere in the emails. We did not focus on static code analysis to generate hundreds or thousands of tickets, which makes no sense. We focused on the important thing. What we also saw was kind of a hesitation for developers to enter new tickets because from their experiences, you remember the situation we were in, that developers really hesitated to invest the time to put the problems they think of and they know, to put them in the system, because in the past their experience was it will anyhow nothing happen. Why should I start to invest my time in really thinking about what is the problem, what is the implication, how can I qualify that, etc. That's a lot of effort to really put high quality tickets in. So there was a kind of a hesitation, but that's a vicious cycle. Without making that information visible, we cannot do anything. But if we are not doing it, developers are hesitating. So, but in many ways we came out of that cycle. Another thing is the balance to not document every little detail, focus on the important things. I cannot name a thumb rule here, but I think you know when you are overwhelmed with too many tickets, and when tickets or things, technical debt things might not be important to document. Sure, we had a developer's learning curve. This learning curve also was for us with feedback to improve the process, to add new ticket attributes, to improve the documentation. That was not only developers' learning curve, that was also our learning curve to improve the process. We took care about the quality of the tickets. We put up some statistics. I mean, sure, over time in that exploration phase, the number of issues is growing, not that the technical debt is growing, but just the documentation of it. And then we started to measure the quality of the tickets. It's a little bit difficult with software to measure the quality of the description of the implication or the description of the problem. That's not possible. What we can measure is every field filled out. Does the field make sense? So that's our indicator of the quality. And as you can see, for some teams, they have still many tickets with low quality, but the overall tendency is that the quality of the tickets is rising. Okay, then, so we explored. Initially, we filled the bucket, and now we started to play with the data, to understand, to communicate internally. So we put up, as we heard, the nice thing is when you have the data, then you can have some charts, and which is really nice, and you can start to understand. And this is a heat map showing the severity here, the contagion. The color is the complexity. So the more red it is, the more complex the problem is, and the opacity is the number of tickets. So here, for example, we have 4 tickets. In that area, we have 84 tickets. And I looked at that and thought about this. And what immediately jumped into my mind was that, and also from my experience, that we have too much focus on low-hanging fruits. That's exactly the first thing I thought of here. We have those major and infectious that, let's say, the not so problematic things, and those are also the ones which are not so complex than the red ones here. And we have many of them, which basically means we have many low-hanging fruits, and I would call it, that's the temptation of low-hanging fruits. I heard it over the years so often, let's focus on the low-hanging fruits, let's focus on the low-hanging fruits. And I thought, when will we start to tackle the procrastinated big things? And such a heat map shows that. It's very nice. Okay, I will skip those. It's just, we have the data, we can make charts. It's really also funny to just have the data and dig into it. So some findings we had. Okay, so what a surprise. We found enterprise level debt, and we asked us who owns that. I mean, the ticket systems are aligned to projects and to products, yeah? So no problem to enter this, but we found some technical where we thought, okay, this technical, where do we put that? And that's something we still don't have an answer, and the talk before gives a little bit of an answer, so I'm very happy that we had the talk about enterprise technical debt. And the question is not only where to put that, but also who owns that, who created that, or who is now the one to make a decision to remove that. And that's really a challenge, and I don't have an answer for. Not today. Maybe next year. I don't know. Next finding is the question how to communicate in the right way. That was one of these feedback loops and the way to even improve the guidelines I showed you. The distinction between the problem, the consequence or the implication, and the proposed solution. We needed to improve here the way to document it, to really be able to communicate in the right way with non-technical people, with management, to say what is really the problem here. Okay, we have many different ticket systems. That's also a challenge, so we need to think about how to combine all those data. But we managed it, as you could see. We had to think about a clear and simple matrix. At first, we started only with 2 matrices. We didn't want to have too much or too many little things to think about, so that's why we came up with the 3 metrics: the severity, complexity, and contagion. And I think that's a fairly good way to categorize the technical debt with all those 3 cost dimensions. Yeah, and so the good, the bad, and the next. What went really good is so all the main codes are covered, all teams adopted the process, or let's say all the main teams adopted the process. So there are some small teams which are not so important, but it was a success that all through the company or through the 80%, let's say that way, the 80% are now covered and adopting to that process. After some iterations at the beginning, we streamlined the process. This was good. I saw in many teams discussions that they really stepped back and had a look at their legacy, which was not before we started this process. So this was kind of a good thing that people really did the job and looked at their software and started some discussions. And also the adoption and recognition by the management is there, and the process and the way we document now technical debt increase the communication. We are not perfect. We need to improve, but it's a good thing that the communication increased, and we were somehow successful with that. And it is also now active part of the release planning that time is invested to remove technical debt. Okay, the bad. The iterations at the beginning created some friction. After initial effort, they started to decrease their engagement. Yeah, it's with every new process the case. And the importance of essential ticket fields was not fully understood in some cases. But that's all things which happen, and we need to work on that. So the next things now we have to make is we need to establish the management process. So we started with it. we saw this kind of decreasing in engagement. We need to improve that and really establish that management process so that it's really long-lasting and we're using it and we go through. We need to ensure discipline in documenting technical debt taken up by purpose. That's one of the biggest challenges, I think, because when you take up technical debt, that's usually in a situation where you are already under pressure and you would like to save time and then have this documenting process there is not very welcomed in many cases. We need a prevention and monitoring. So when we fix technical debt, that we test the regression. So I mean, we test and prevent regression, and we monitor the success of removing technical debt. That's something we need to set up. And finally, we need to discuss, balance, and decide what to fix and how. That's basically the difficult part. Now we were only talking about the management of technical debt, but our goal is to remove the technical debt and only the technical debt, remove only the technical debt which is worth to remove, where we gain more than we lose. Yeah, the summary, we had misalignment and increasing debt. We defined a process to manage, decide, and pay back. We filled the bucket. We had a look at the full picture and decided and start to decide to pay back. And now we are in the phase to establishing that process. At the beginning, we had only sticky notes, various lists, crowd knowledge, and emails. Now we have a database with weighted technical debt issues. It's not yet perfect, yeah? We need to improve here, but it changed a lot. So the takeaways I have for you is technical debt management is necessary for transparency and to be able to communicate. A common understanding is fundamental for the process. The quality of the tickets is important, and the prioritization is important to not get overwhelmed with too many small things. And the hard stuff is yet to come, so to refactor and fixing the issues. Okay, thank you very much. Questions?
Thank you, Matthias. Very nice. Questions?
So, are the teams starting to fix these issues? And if so, how are they taking them on? Are they having like one sprint for technical debt, or are they integrating into normal, putting it next to features, or what's your advice to them on this? How to pay it down?
That's a difficult thing. Every team, the teams do it differently. Some teams really have they have a percentage of resources they dedicate to removing technical debt, and for others they are driven by bugs and features. So they look at their features and bugs, and then they look at the technical debt and what is the technical debt which prevents them to add new features or to fix some bugs. Where do we have dependencies? That really, so my answer is it depends. And we are also starting to learn how to do it.
Are teams asking you when they should log a ticket for technical debt versus just refactoring it as part of story development? And if so, what is your guidance on that?
Yeah, we had that question, and in many cases I say just log it. But if it's a problem which is to fix in less than 2 weeks, just do it. Something like this. I think everybody needs to do it differently. The overhead. I mean, this process creates an overhead, and if the overhead is not worth the thing, then just fix it.
How did, basically, are you suggesting the developer should be creating the ticket for the tech debt, or it's the architect or tech lead's responsibility? One question. Second question I have is, where were they capturing this? Is it a simple Excel sheet or some Confluence site, or is it a tool they used for capturing
Okay,
this data?
question number one. Everybody is invited to enter technical debt tickets, but an architecture team or an architecture board is requested to have a look at it, to decide is it really technical debt or is it something else, and are all the attributes, metrics, etc. are set so that the ticket is of a high quality. Second, we use our ticket systems, which is in our case Jira, Redmine, and TFS.
Okay. Ipek, you have just written a book about all this. Huh? Rod as well, yeah. So, does one of you have any questions for Matthias?
Well, obviously, thank you very much. I very much agree with most of the things you've said. One question I have is, how long did it take for you to socialize it with the team? Because initially there might be a pushback because it puts the developer on the spot that you are taking on technical debt, and so how did that process go through?
We basically started that last year in May. We prepared the teams by talking about technical debt upfront, and then step by step. I mean, it was a management decision to do that, and that's why we were able to execute it, and it helped.
Linda.
So you have a nice management level process, but you also talked about the overhead of having such a process. So anything that we institute at that level that requires everybody to do something and do it systematically does have an overhead. As part of your next steps, are you going to keep metrics as to the value add of your process in terms of the speed with which you can make changes or features? I mean, what's the overall value for what you're doing with the process, and are you going to collect that?
Difficult question. I mean, it depends. That's right. Yeah. That's always the best answer. It depends. I mean, sure, there's an overhead, but we have a similar overhead with bugs, and it's obvious we need to manage that, and we really need to have that balance of I mean, even for some bugs, it's not necessary to really track them to enter it in the ticket, and I think we here need to find that balance. To not document things which are not worth to go through that process and have discussions. I have seen that about some problems we discussed so much and invested so much time in discussions that fixing the problem would have been much easier and much faster.
So one final question. So you have talked about making the debt visible and making it very visible in various ways and colors and stuff. Apart from the embarrassment, I'm wondering, what is the incentive for the teams to now pick this up and to remediate the technical debt, apart from the embarrassment of being very visible as a red team, but having, is there any other incentive for the teams to work on the technical debt?
On one side, there's a company incentive to do that. It's just mandated, and so the mandate is maybe the mandate itself is not an incentive, but some bonuses are depending on technical debt removal. But the highest incentive is that the teams want to get rid of the technical debt they have. They would like to have time given to them that they are actually able to really remove the technical debt.
Right. Well, thank you very much.